scientific proof that we are becoming literal gods. What if I told you that in 1,000 years we will look like petty cavemen in our current physical and mental state compared to future humans? There is an overwhelming amount of scientific evidence that proves that not only are our physical bodies evolving at an accelerated rate, our the consciousness is as well. We're indeed in the evolutionary fast lane, and perhaps we're witnessing the prophecies of apotheosis in action. Our consciousness and bodies are evolving at a rate never seen before in the history of Earth. We can look around the world and see the signs of dramatic spiritual evolution as we continue to actualize our fullest potential. There is an awakening happening right now, and it will mark the dawn of a new age of enlightenment. But as this global awakening is happening, our physical vehicles and intelligent levels are also evolving as we step into the light of this new age. In 2007, Dr. John Hawkes, professor of anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, published an article in the peer-reviewed journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, titled Recent Acceleration of Human Adaptive Evolution. This article showed that positive selection within human beings has occurred at a rate 100 times higher than any other time in human history, and that this massive acceleration within evolution has happened particularly within the last 5,000 years. The study specifically looked for DNA sequence variations known as SNPs, which are mutations at a single point on a chromosome. As indicated in Health and Medical Week, the researchers identify recent genetic change by finding long blocks of DNA base pairs that are connected. Because human DNA is constantly being reshuffled through recombination, a long, uninterrupted segment of LD is usually evidence of positive selection. Linkage disequilibrium decays quickly as recombination occurs across many generations, so finding these uninterrupted segments is strong evidence of recent adaptation, Hawkes says. The researchers concluded that as the population of human beings continues to increase, the acceleration effect of evolution has also increased because of the amount of room there is for new mutations to occur and be passed throughout the population. According to the original journal article publication, approximately 1,800 genes, or 7% of our entire genetic system, have experienced recent positive selection, and they add that to the extent that new adaptive alleles continue to reflect demographic growth, the Neolithic and later periods would have experienced a rate of adaptive evolution less than 100 times higher than characterized by most of human evolution. And within the cultivation of agriculture, the constant changes and experimentation in diet, such as adaptive tolerances to lactose and milk, the exposure to diseases such as introduction of the CCR5 gene to make people resistant to AIDS, and the massive spike in human population within the last 10,000 years, nature has been presented with the optimal breeding grounds for positive selection and new adaptive mutations and introduction of massive gene pool and constantly changing environments. For example, in only the past few millennia, Europeans have experienced rapid changes in the gene for a protein that transferred potassium ions in and out of taste buds and nerve cells, as well as changes in genes associated with Alzheimer's disease and even cancer. John Hawkes' boldest of claims was recorded on the University of Wisconsin website, where Hawkes says, "We are more different genetically from people living 5,000 years ago than they were different from Neanderthals." In other words, if you take a human being from 3000 BC, such as an ancient Egyptian, you will find that they are most similar to Neanderthals in terms of their genetics than they are to us. Anthropologist and geneticist Dr. Henry Harpending from University of Utah also participated in conducting the study and told National Geographic that if humans had always evolved at this rate, the difference between modern humans and chimps would be 160 times greater than really is. There is a vast body of empirical evidence that suggests that human beings have recently been the subject of accelerated natural selection within the genetic information. There is also evidence that this recent acceleration in evolution is not only biologically physical but also mental in terms of intelligence. J.R. Flynn, professor of political science at University of Otago, New Zealand, discovered that IQ scores across the globe have gone up 3 points on average per decade for each decade for as long as IQ test scores have been recorded, which has been since 1910 in the United States. This means that someone that scored in the top 10 on the IQ test 100 years ago would now be in the weakest 5%. These increases have been occurring at a steady rate among both male and female genders and have been empirically verified in over 20 countries. The average IQ score has always been set at 100. So if a person passed the IQ test with a score of 130, they're among the higher end of performers, and a score of 80 would deviate far from the average raw score. What is striking is that IQ scores have had to be continually made more difficult over the last century to keep the mean score at 100. Flynn discovered that the greatest differences were found in culturally reduced tests and fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence is the ability to think rationally, abstractly, and find solutions to novel problems independent of acquired knowledge. He makes adamant the fact that these are not learned content gains through more information being accessible to people, as this would only reflect crystallized intelligence regarding the application of learned knowledge. And furthermore, other environmental factors such as more education and better economic situation are impoverished when trying to adequately explain the gaps in some of these cases, such as the increase in IQ scores by a total of 20 points in 30 years by the people of Holland, the Dutch. As Flynn states in one of his original papers, the international data fall into the same pattern as the American data. Gains are about 18 IQ points per generation, 30 years on Ravens, somewhere between 9 and 18 points on Wechsler and Stanford Binet tests, and about 9 points on purely verbal tests, small or nil, on Wechsler subsets such as arithmetic, information, and vocabulary. The Ravens test measures reasoning abilities using abstract objects independent of language, writing, and reading. This means that these test increases are not a result of people having more access to knowledge and information, but shows that, on the contrary, the most significant results were indicated in testings that involve pure problem-solving intelligence, such as identifying nonverbal patterns and relationships. Environmental impacts that can explain these increases in IQ, the IQ scores, have yet to be identified and are still being speculated upon. These are some of the most important discoveries in psychology, which Flynn calls a cultural renaissance too great to be overlooked. Contrary to some of the scientific consensus, human evolution is undergoing dramatic increase in terms of genetics and intelligence. We now have scientific proof that evaluation is not merely a matter of cultural ingenuity and social conditions, nor is it exclusively reserved for psychological, physiological adaptation, but is in fact a concrete measurable phenomenon in human psychology that happening within our species right now. Evolution can now be spoken of in something that is currently in a state of progress towards complexity, as we have seen from the evidence of geneticists and psychologists alike. Is this accelerated state just one random hiccup that will plateau in the near future? Will we continue to evolve at this exponential rate from this point forwards? Are we witnessing the physical manifestation of the ancient prophecies of human apotheosis in action? This area remains ripe for investigation, and insofar as the conditions in which this evolution is occurring remain present, population increases, environmental changes, technological and intellectual refining, we should see this effect sufficiently sustained as we enter this new age of evolution and continue to explore this exciting frontier. In 1,000 years, we will be literal gods in comparison to our current state. We will have technologies and abilities that we could only dream of right now, and our bodies will be so much more evolved that we will look back at a millennium and wonder how ancient man lived such primitive lives with such archaic bodies. Maybe we really are entering the golden age of spiritual and physical evolution, so many ancient cultures spoke of. This is from Soul Ask. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.